Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi tahirin. So we are continuing our lessons on monotheism, Tawheed, and atheism, and our response to atheism. So in the last lessons, we introduced Tawheed and monotheism and atheism. And then we started to introduce the arguments against the claim of there are no arguments which prove the existence of God. So to refute their false claim, we start bringing several arguments that prove the existence of God. So we talked about some aspects related to Burhaninism, the argument of design, the argument of system, the argument of pattern and organization. We can conclude from that that the fact that there is pattern, both external to our minds and within our minds, proves that there is a designer, that there is a creator. So, of course, this is a proof against their claim. So now we want to move to another argument which proves the existence of Allah the Exalted. So this next argument is the argument of contingency and necessity. Now, imkan al-wujud and wajib al-wujud. This is the argument of the necessary being and the contingent being, or contingent beings. So whensoever we observe and consider things which we conceive in our minds, in our dhinni world, as a concept in our mind, we can say that that concept in the mind in which we have, in its relation to its existence, is only one of three possibilities. Every single thing that we can think of in our minds, its relation to existence can only be one of three possibilities. There's no fourth, fifth, or sixth. And it cannot lack one of these. It has to be one or the other. So either that thing that we think of, say we think of a wall in the mind. We have sur. We think of fence in the mind, or we think of wall, or we think of bait, house. That thing in relation to its existence, either it is necessary existence, or it is possible existence, imkan, or it is impossible. So impossible to exist. So something is either necessary to exist, means it has to exist. It's necessary to exist, or it's possible to exist. It doesn't have to be here. It can be here. It cannot be here. It's possible to exist, or it's impossible to exist. So let's go through them. So the first, necessary to exist, wajib al-wujud. Wajib. Something is wajib to exist. Here, what we mean is something which is not contingent. Something which is not mumkin al-wujud. In its that, in its self, in its essence. This thing which is necessary itself is self-subsistent. So it doesn't need anything. Self-sufficient. Doesn't need anything. It's needless. It is also a non-compound reality. We have two things. We have, in philosophy we study, we have things could be basit, simple, or they could be murakkab, compound. So basit means something has no parts. Murakkab, compound, means something has parts. And when something has parts, it needs those other parts to be it. It needs those other parts. So when something needs its different parts, it's needy. And that is a sign of contingency. This necessary thing, it's something that doesn't need anything. So it's a non-compound reality. So when we say necessary being, wajib al-wujud, we mean a being which is self-subsistent, needless, self-sufficient, and a non-compound reality. Even over here, we could look at the issue of change. Any type of change would indicate you are in need, because you lack something, then you are affected by it. You lack something, and then you need it, or you are impacted by something. So anyways, so that is necessary being, wajib being. So that's the first relation. Anything we conceive in the mind can either be necessary in its existence, possible in existence, or impossible in its existence. What's the possible? Mumkin al-wujud. Imkan. Possible. This is what we call as contingent. Contingent. This is something which its quiddity, mahia, is on the equal side between existence and non-existence. It's equal. It doesn't have to be there. It's not necessary to be there in itself. And it's not impossible that it's there in itself. So it's possible being. It's equal between the two sides. Hence, this possible being will require something to push it into the state of existence. Now, of course, it's just mental way to think about it, because before that thing existed, it didn't exist. So it wasn't there. It's not like it was there and then something pushed it. But for that very thing to be here now, to be here at any time, it needed something to push it into existence, to bring it out of just being a possibility and cause it to exist. So it needed something to cause it to exist. This is all creation. This is the entire creation. This is everything other than Allah is like this. Everything other than Allah is a contingent being. Everything. Every single thing. Not from the smallest, not from the biggest. Is there anything except a contingent being other than Allah? Allah is the only necessary being. Okay, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We just talk about these relations, then we go. So that's the second one. Possible being, something which is in between necessary existence and something which is in between existence and non-existence. So something has to cause it to exist. It's possible to exist. So possible being is something which is quiddity, is on the equal sides between existence and non-existence. So something has to push it into the state of existence. The third possibility or relation to existence is impossibility. This is something which is impossible to exist. It's impossible to exist in its very self, like a partner to God. Okay, we can conceive this idea, but in reality, it's impossible for there to be a partner to God, and that has arguments for that, of course. So in the external world, it's impossible for there to be a partner to God. It's just something we can think of. It's something that we can think of as a way, then we can negate that. We could think of opposites and contraries in the mind. The mind's a very amazing thing. So whenever we conceive of something and we consider its relation to existence, it's either necessary in itself or it's possible to exist as contingent beings, or it's impossible to exist. So those are the three relations. Whatever we conceive in the mind, it relates to one of these three. These are logical possibilities in relation to if they exist or not in the external world. In kharaji, in concreto, this is the logical possibilities for if these things that we conceive in our minds exist or not. For things that we are aware of existing, if they exist or not. All the things we think of may be taking one of these titles, one of these relations to them. Either it exists necessarily in itself, or it is contingent, or it is contingent and exists due to the cause making it exist, or it is impossible for it to exist. You could go test your thoughts and see which relation they have to these three. Now then, when we look at the creation around us, when we look at the world around us, we will notice that all these things are contingent. All things that we observe, all the things that we could think of in creation, they are imkan al-wujud, they are mumkinat. They are contingent beings, they are possible beings. They are needy in themselves. They're dependent things and possible to exist. So pause that there. That means all creation is in deep poverty to Allah the Exalted. Just keep that in mind for the rest of the argument. After you understand this, you should reflect on the fact that all things are in deep poverty and Allah is only rich. Because everything depends on Allah the Exalted. Everything is needy to Allah the Exalted. There's not a thing in creation which is free of its need for Allah. Nothing. So when we look at the world around us, we see that all these things in creation, they are contingent beings. They are needy and dependent and possible to exist. Things have a starting point. Things need in their survival and continuation. So all these things in creation, they have starting points. They need in their survival and their continuation. So they are needy in their initiation, in their continuation, and their survival. Now, if we say, what caused the contingent being to exist? What caused the contingent being to exist? We have some possibilities here. Either that cause of contingent being is a necessary being, or it's a possible being, another contingent being caused it. As impossibility cannot cause it. So the relation to impossibility to exist cannot cause anything. As it was impossible to exist, so how did it cause anything to exist when it is impossible to exist? It wasn't even there to cause anything. So impossible thing cannot cause it as it was impossible to exist. So how did it do anything like that? It had no external effect. So how could it cause? How could it have an external effect? How could it have an impact when it doesn't even exist itself? So we crossed the third possibility out here. We're talking about what caused the contingent being. Now we narrow down to two possibilities. Either it's a necessary being caused it, or a contingent being caused it, another contingent being. If we say it is a contingent being that caused contingent beings, then we end up in a problem over here. This problem is refuted by the mind. That is, either it is door or tasalsul. Okay, so these are two new terms for you. Door and tasalsul. What is door? Door is what we can say in English as endless loop. Endless loop, like a circle. Like if I say Zayd is the father of Ahmed, Ahmed is the father of Zayd, and Zayd is the father of Ahmed. You see? It went around in a loop. It wasn't, different fathers. It went around in a circular loop. This is door. This is invalid over here. This is invalid here. Because why? Something cannot cause something to exist if it didn't exist itself. So, if you say that a contingent being caused the contingent beings, if this is door, if this ends up in an endless loop, then that's impossible. Can't be an endless loop because something cannot cause something to exist if it doesn't exist itself. Okay, so so that option's off. It cannot be door. What about tasalsul? Tasalsul, they call infinite regression. We could call this endless chain. Imagine like a chain, this endless chain. So this one as well is not valid. This is like saying there's a chain of causes and effects that goes on for infinity. Such thing is absurd, firstly, because every line, every chain requires a starting point. It requires an ending point. So since we cannot accept these two solutions, we must admit there is a necessary being. That is wajib al-wujud. That causes things to exist. That causes all the contingent things to exist. That bestows contingent existence upon them. But it is not contingent itself. So that being must be wajib al-wujud. Hence, we proved here with this that there is a creator who is wajib al-wujud, needless, necessary being, and non-contingent. Okay, now say, even if we say for argument's sake, that there is this large chain, large group of endless chain. Imagine we have this large group of contingent beings. Can one contingent being cause the other, another contingent being cause the other, another one cause the other, and so on, so on, so on, so on, so on. Okay. Say we could imagine that. This is a possibility. So for argument's sake, imagine we have this endless chain of contingent beings. We would have to admit here that this entire chain is contingent. Why? Because this is a chain of contingent beings. And if there's a chain of contingent beings, we would say that this whole chain is contingent. So the whole entire chain now requires a cause. You see? Hence, it requires a cause from external to itself. External to its contingency, because contingency itself requires a cause, because it's only a possible being, to push it into existence. So it requires a cause from external to its contingency to cause its existence, which cannot be contingent itself. Otherwise, we're going in a circle here. We're going into we're going back to there's an argument now against the endless chain, and now what do we have left? Door. So as a contingent being cannot cause itself to exist because it doesn't exist yet. And since the whole chain was contingent, then the whole chain would require a non-contingent cause to cause it to exist. So really, no matter which way you went on this, you have to admit there's a wajib, a wujud, necessary being, which is non-contingent. The next argument is the argument of causality. The principle of causality is a fundamental principle for all scientific endeavors. And it's very obvious to us that there is causality. We observe and we know self-evidently even, and clearly even, that causality occurs. Causality is that whenever there is an effect, it tells us that there is a cause. So the law of causality tells us that every effect has a cause. And every effect is in need of a cause. Because an effect is needy for a cause. So if we imagine there is a chain of causes, we are faced again with three possibilities. Either that chain is resulting in tasalsul, infinite regression, which is not valid. We could bring the same things that we brought from earlier. Door, it's not valid because it would result in something causing itself before it exists. Or a necessary cause that is not the effect of anything. So we have three options then in our mind when we talk about the effects and causes. Either it's infinite regression, which is invalid. Either it is door, which is invalid, or there is a necessary cause that doesn't need anything to cause it. It's not the effect of anything. It's self-sufficient. Therefore, our minds, our akal, proves there is the existence of a necessary cause for all contingent effects. So our minds can tell us there's a wajib al-wujud, and there is a necessary cause. These two arguments prove that there's the existence of God. Now there's a sophistic. Now sophistic doesn't mean sophisticated, like, it means the deception kind of thing, like the sophist, like they had in Greek times, and even these things they permeate throughout the ages. These false things that look like true propositions, but people mistaking them for true propositions, but they're not true, they're false. So some kind of sophistical objection. So maybe they try to say this, every effect needs a cause. So what is the cause of God? So they object, they claim, they say, if every effect needs a cause, then what is the cause of God? Okay, now this is a point some people don't maybe pick up on, and maybe you see it already after reviewing this. Is they're saying every effect needs a cause. What is the cause of God? It's very important to always pay attention closely to the word. So how can we answer this sophistical objection? Kind of immature objection, actually. We said every effect needs a cause. We said every effect needs a cause. Not every cause is an effect. We didn't say the law of causality says that every cause is an effect. We said it says that every effect needs a cause, not that every cause is an effect. Hence, there are causes which are dependent They are needy causes of a cause. And there is a cause which is necessary and doesn't need any cause. Hence, it is not the effect of any cause. Rather, it is the necessary cause in itself. Hence, every effect needs a cause. But not every cause is an effect. So, this objection of theirs is invalid. It's bought. Redefine what you're talking about. Know what you're defining. Know what you're talking about. We're not talking about. We're saying every effect needs a cause. Not every cause is an effect. So correct your definition of the principle of causality. So that is two arguments against the claim of there is no arguments which prove the existence of God. So these are two more arguments that could be added. The argument of wajib al-wujud and the argument of the necessary cause. Here is where I'll end the lesson. Until next week, wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.